All right. So hopefully you caught the beginning of Daniel. There's some background on Daniel that's probably good to know. And so if you had a chance to check that out, go check that out. If you haven't had a chance, go check that out. And so, but we're going to jump right into Daniel 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, and I will mispronounce dozens of names as we go through this, I'm sure, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, and some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the articles into the treasures of the house of his God. And so we're getting an introduction to Nebuchadnezzar. We're going to talk about some of the gods of Babylon here in a little bit, but he's named after Nabu, and a Sumerian Babylonian. So you're going to find out a lot of the gods that were there. They're similar to the gods of the Assyrians, the Sumerians, Babylonians. That whole crescent area has the same gods, and so Nabu was the god that he was named after, and he's the god of wisdom and writing. And so I think the articles that represent him are a stylus and a tablet. And so he's attacking Jerusalem on his way to Egypt. And the reason why he's attacking Jerusalem is because Jerusalem had allied with Egypt, and Babylon is at war with Egypt. So it's kind of an interesting. There was in Isaiah 30, Isaiah warns Hezekiah about this alliance. It's a bad alliance, and I find it kind of interesting too, just the symbology here too, because Egypt is always symbolic of the world, secular world, and so here is Judah in a partnership and an alliance with the world. And Sandra even pointed out something as we were talking about this too. Here's their prior captive, and they're in an alliance with their prior captive. So it's kind of odd that they would do this, and even despite God's warnings. And so you see here too, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands. So you see the Lord taking an active part in Judah going into captivity. And so what's even more interesting here too, the more I look at this, there's these just a continual voice of God speaking out to Israel, to the Jews, to God's people continually. And so it's here as well. In Isaiah 39:7, this is actually fulfilling of Isaiah 39:7, which says, "And they shall take away some of your sons who will descend from you, whom you will beget, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." We talked about that last time we were talking about Daniel. And interestingly enough, too, Jeremiah had prophesied about this too, and the king tried to cut it out, and it talks about it. Go back and read Jeremiah 36 verses 27 through 31. Because he tried to burn Jeremiah's warning about Babylon coming. Jehoiakim, I'm going to have a hard time with that name. Jehoiakim. Anyways, so he had a tough time with that, and Jeremiah had spoken about that. He tried to get rid of it, and Jeremiah God says, "Hey, all that stuff he tore up, write it again." And so now, interestingly, some of the articles so he took Judah into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God. And they're carried away. And so some of them are carried away, and some of them are hidden. And some are going to happen too. Because you have to understand, Nebuchadnezzar had to cut his siege short. His dad died, and he was a general at the time, and it wasn't certain that he would actually get the throne. So he had to run home. He runs home. He's going to come back in 2 more waves. So that's what we do. And these temple articles are going to be brought into the land of Shinar, back into Babylon. So, which is kind of interesting here too. There's 2 values to this stuff that's being brought back. First off, obviously, it's the face value of the gold. Everything's gold plated or solid gold, however the case may be, depending on the implement. But the other thing that this plays a factor is propaganda. Both the Assyrians and the Babylonians, whatever they had in their possession, they attributed to their God, which is actually the way we should be too. So whatever victories they had, they attributed to their God. So whatever booty they brought back, they could say, here, the God of the Jews. We conquered the God of the Jews, and here's the implements of that God, and we have them, and we brought them back to our God. So our God is greater. Kind of reminds me to some degree Akbar. Akbar means Allah is greater than, and so they'll say Allah Akbar. That's actually what I meant to say. Allah Akbar is Allah is greater than, and you fill in the blank. And so that's what's happening here. And it's going to be interesting too. Belshazzar is actually going to forget about how holy these things are. When we get to Daniel 5, you're going to see some of these things kind of get brought back into the picture. So verse 3, then the king instructed Ashpenaz, I told you I was going to mess these names up, the master of the eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there is no blemish, but good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had the ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom that might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. Keep in mind, the Chaldeans is the actual name for the Babylonians. We won't get into that. Go back and listen to Daniel 0, and then I'll explain that there. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of the time they might serve before the king. Okay, so taking the captured young nobles back to court served several purposes. First off, if you had the nobles of the people who you captured, that's going to prevent a rebellion. It's real simple. There was also a thing that took place in a lot of cultures throughout world history, and that is when you bring your captives back to your city and you institutionalize them into your belief system, you've kind of like totally defeated your enemy. You now have you've brainwashed them. I'll give you a good example of this. Ottomans love to do this. They have this Devshar system where they basically go up into the Balkan Peninsula every year and they steal Christian boys. And so these are Muslims. They steal Christian boys, bring them back to Istanbul, retrain them, and actually turn them into the Janissary, which were the Marine Corps of the Ottomans. And so this happens a lot throughout world history, where you see captors taking hostages and converting them to their thinking. And so that's just what's happening here. And I find this very ironic, though, because if you think about it, this whole reason why Israel is being taken captive, is being turned over, God turned them over, is to begin with is because they were chasing after other gods. So where are they now? They're in the land of other gods. Go figure. So he's got them learning the language and the literature, which I think is interesting too, because when you step back from this idea, keep in mind they're learning the language and the literature. That's the first step to being a missionary. You want to be a missionary, you got to learn the language and the literature. But they did have a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank. And keep this in mind, because I was thinking about this afterwards. These are young men. I mean, Daniel's a young man. He's probably 18, 19. He's being offered delicacies and wine. Young men basically being trained in the way of the enemy, but, appealing to your soft side. I think to a degree there's a certain enticement that the world offers us from time to time, that forbidden fruit, that is there, that's held out for them to do. So that's going on there. And so let's go to verse 6. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name of Belteshazzar. I told you I wasn't going to do good with these names. Hananiah, Shadrach. To Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. And so there's a name change right off the get-go to basically disconnect the Jews from their God. And so we learned earlier about Nabu. And so you're going to see but before I get to that, because I'm going to go through the names of the gods that they're named after, their name versus the name that they're going to be changed to. First, because you have to understand, and if you go back and see or read Daniel or listen to Daniel 0, the contextualization I did for Daniel 1, you'll see that Judah has a roller coaster of leadership as to how dedicated they were to God. And they were on the downhill slide when they got taken captive. And so my hat is off to the parents of these 4 young men, because they gave them very godly names, which speaks to the heritage of the parents, which is somewhat inherited into the young people. So hats off, because you're going to see when you look at these names, you're going to go, in a spiritually dark climate, parents are naming their kids this. Good on them. And so that's what I say, good on them. So here's some of the names. Daniel, Daniel means God is my judge. Okay, that's a good name. And he's and also I read some commentary, and I'm not certain on this, so don't take me 100% with this. I'm not certain. I thought it was kind of an interesting idea. One of the commentaries I read said that Daniel misspelled all of their new names wrong because they were glorifying the gods of the Babylonians. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think that's kind of cool. If it is the case, that's kind of a sneaky little thing that Daniel did. But anyways, Belshazzar, and he was named after Bel, which is also Marduk. He's the god of order and destiny. And I was thinking some of these gods, what would they be today? The god of order and destiny. To me, that's big government. That's a god of big government. And a lot of people have that as their god, big government. The next one is Hananiah. His Jewish name means God has been gracious. There you go. Good parenting right there. He's named Shadrach, and he's named after the god Aku. Aku is Sin, the moon god, and it's not Sin, but that's his name, Sin, the moon god. And he's the Lord of knowledge. And if I was putting him today, I would say he'd be the god of academia. And so once again, there's people who just look at academia, smart people with PhDs behind their name, as really godlike. And so I'm not there. Sorry. Michelle's name is Who is as God? Who is as God? Who is as God? There's no one like him. He's Meshach, and he's named after the same God, Aku. And then the last one is Azariah. The Lord is my help. And he's the servant. He's named after the servant of Nabu, which was the same one earlier, which was the God of wisdom and writing. And I would say today he's pretty close to the God of academia. This is the God of books, and of knowledge that you can attain and aspire to, And so anyways, those are what they're named after. I thought those were some interesting names and making some connections to today. Verse 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. I'm going to make sure that's recording. Okay. So he purposed in his heart. Okay, I call this the Daniel 2-step. Daniel does 2 steps here that I think is very interesting. First one is step 1 is he makes up his mind early. And so he purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. And this is a young man. You got to think of this. This is a young man, 18 years old, 19 years old. And he's purposing in his heart that he's not going to defile himself. He was not abandoning God. He was not going to abandon him. And even though he didn't know what God was doing, and some thought maybe God had abandoned him, he was not abandoning God. He definitely didn't understand what God was doing, okay? But he wasn't going to let that get in his way, and I think that's kind of interesting. He finds fault with the food and drink, okay? And these, whether this, whether these were foods that were offered to gods, and that was offensive. I don't know. It doesn't say. Or perhaps they were non-kosher foods. Doesn't say. But so step one is he makes up his mind. Here's step two. He seeks permission. You're going to find Daniel, he requested. Daniel is a permission seeker. And I have to, I was thinking about this. Why is he a permission seeker? Because he does this a lot throughout the book of Daniel. You'll see him seeking permission. And I initially was thinking, okay, maybe because he's a captive, and so he's walking in that role of being a captive and asking, the people who are in charge of him permission. I don't know. And I have to say too, I am the kind of guy. I picked this up in the Navy somewhere. It's easier to beg forgiveness than it is ask permission. So I'm not a permission seeker I don't typically do that. I should do that. I don't typically do that. But as I was thinking about this, I think Daniel, as a permission seeker, he invites others into what God is about to do. And so he asks permission. He talks to the Lord. He comes up with these ideas, and then he asks permission. And by doing that, he's bringing others in. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. That's the Daniel 2-step. Make up your mind early and seek permission. Verse 9. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor. I like that too. God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should you see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So it was good too. He's asking permission, to not eat these foods, so that he doesn't defile himself. But he's also his decision affects others, and so he's getting permission. So I think that's kind of cool too. But I want to key in that first verse, or that first part of that verse 9 there. God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill. And I like that. That's a prayer to pray. And I see that in people too. I see that in godly people. I can see where God brings them into favor. I even see it with my own sons. My own sons have found favor. I was even talking to one of them the other day about that, how he has found favor, and he knows who he is. But there's a couple of verses too that go. I was talking about prayers to pray. Here's a couple to pray. Hold God to his word. Psalm 5, verse 12. For you, O Lord, will bless the righteous. With favor, you will surround him with a shield. I like that one. Here's another one. Psalm 90, verse 17. And let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. And so we see here, let's just jump over to Daniel 11. But I like that too. I like that whole finding favor. That's pretty cool. Verse 11. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink, and then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented with him in this matter and tested them for 10 days. So there's his plan. He's unleashed his plan. He's told the gentleman who's gonna have to pay for it if his plan doesn't work out, the 10-day plan. So then a 10-day plan, and there's going to skip the king's food and wine. Instead, it's yours may say vegetables. If you look at the word there, the Hebrew word, it actually means sown food. So we're talking fruit and vegetables. So they're going to drink water and fruit and vegetables for 10 days, and instead of the wine and the delicacies that were set out for them. So it's an examination based upon appearance. Now, I'm wondering if I can teach you a little bit of math. I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but I got to introduce some information first. So you have to understand defilement, because he purposes in his heart not to defile himself. And so you have to understand, how do we defile ourselves? And Jesus spoke specifically to How do we, where is, how is a man defiled? Is it what he eats? Okay. And you can find that in Matthew 15, verses 17, 19. This is Jesus speaking, so it's red letters. Do you not yet understand that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and is eliminated? But those things which proceed out of the mouth comes from the heart, and they defile a man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulterers, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, and blasphemies. Okay, so it's what's in our heart that defiles us, not what goes in our mouth. All right, makes sense? So I'm going to teach you the transitive, it's called the transitive law. And it's real simple. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. It's a transitive law. It makes sense? I'll say it again, because it's math, and you should never do math in public. If A equals B and B equals C, you basically pull B out of there. A equals C. All right, that's transitive law. So, because I'm going to kind of walk you through this, because I was thinking about, as I was thinking about this, I'm like going, because I'm going to do the A equals C here, and you tell me what you think. All right. So it's a pure heart is what Daniel had. He did not want to defile his pure heart. Okay. So that his pure heart affected the actions he took. So pure heart equals actions taken. So far, so good? All right. Now, the actions taken created a healthier appearance. So you with me again? So pure heart equals actions taken. Actions taken equals a healthier appearance. So you ready for the A equals C? Here we go. A pure heart equals a healthier appearance. Our pure heart affects our appearance. What is in our heart affects how we look. Isn't that kind of interesting? People should see in you, they should see God in you. They should see your heart in you. And I thought that was kind of like, whoa, that's kind of cool. Anyways, so back to verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of the delicacies and the wine that they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. Okay, so they're 10 days goes by, they're fatter. Okay, I don't know about you, but I don't get fatter when I'm drinking water and eating fruit and vegetables. I don't get fatter, but they got fatter. And so I in typical teacher fashion, I made, multiple choice out of this. Okay, so all four got fatter. Option A, it's an act of God. Option B, what the king was eating was seriously bad. Option C, their dedicated heart could be seen. That was the A equals C. I slipped that in there. Or option D, all the above. It'd have to be option D, I think. And so here's the other thing too that was kind of interesting too, took away their portion. So the whole time they're on this diet, if you want to call it a diet, I would call it a diet, they had the option to cheat. The food was out. It was the whole time. The wine was out. These are young men with wine. And like, hey, I'm drinking the water. I'm fine here. I applaud it to him. So verse 17, as these four young men, God gave them, as for these four young men, God gave them knowledge and skill and in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all vision and dreams. Okay, so this is the third time we see God directly acting in these guys' life, or at least in this chapter. Verse 2, we see the Lord, that's Adonai, God of strength, basically giving the king over to the Babylonians. So that's God's first direct action. And the second time we see him is verse 9. That's Elohim. That's the Lord of all. He's bringing Daniel goodwill and favor. And then the last time we see is right here is God. This is Elohim again, is giving them knowledge. He's giving them a skill in literature and wisdom. And so they not only know the content, but they can apply it. And Daniel's got that extra thing. He's got a understanding in all visions and dreams. And so that's pretty cool. So here we're getting close to the end here. So verse 18. Now at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in. The chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Then the king interviewed them, and among them all, none was found like Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they served before the king in all matters of wisdom and understanding, about which the king examined them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians, astrologers who were in his realm. Thus, Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. Okay, so the end of days. So they basically were on this diet and this learning process for 3 years. And I like that very last sentence, and continued until the first year of King Cyrus. And that's the year where the captives are going to be set free. So pretty much is laying out here in chapter 1 that Daniel's there for the duration of captivity. He's there. He would serve as an influencer to the leadership throughout the entire captivity. And so I was looking at that. It's just kind of cool. Okay, so in chapter 1 here, we see God allowing Israel, or actually Judah, to be taken into captivity and joined with Israel in captivity. So he's done that, and all the while he's set a prophet amongst the leadership of whoever took them, as well as he sets Ezekiel amongst the people who are captive in Babylon. And so it's just really kind of cool there that God is with his people in captivity. Something to remember, when you feel like you're alone with what's going on, God's right there with you. I think that's kind of cool here with Ezekiel and Daniel. You got 2 prophets in captivity, one with the leadership, one with the people. That's pretty cool. And so it kind of this whole chapter kind of brought me back to the 23rd Psalm, and I'll read it for you because in captivity, God doesn't leave us. In Psalm 23, it's often read at funerals when really it's about life. You got to remember it's about life. It starts off kind of really nice, like things are going good, but hang in there. So, anyways, the Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. So far, it sounds pretty good, right? He restores my soul, which means my soul needed restoring. Something happened. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his namesake. So that means there's some options to go the other way. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And a rod and a staff, you got to keep in mind, a rod and a staff, a rod is both a guide to the sheep, but it's also a defender against attackers. So rod and staff will comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And so there's provision. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's cool. That's cool. So just a couple questions to leave you with tonight or today, whenever you're listening to this. The first question is, what do you normally do when you find yourself somewhere where you didn't plan to be? God has put you somewhere. That's not really where you'd like to be. It's not really where you want to be, but God puts you there because God is sovereign and God will have his way. And so what do you do? What's your normal reaction? And sometimes when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death and God puts you there, what do you normally do? That's the first question I want you to think about. Journal on maybe. Journaling is a great way to kind of explore some things. Here's the second question. Are you a permission seeker or a forgiveness beggar like me? And kind of think about that. Which do you do? And examine Daniel's 2-step that we talked about. And then the third question I have for you is, have you noticed God speaking or acting or walking alongside you during hard times? He's there. I can guarantee you he's there. And so look for him. Listen for him. Pay attention to him. All right? So that's Daniel 1. It's a great chapter. To tune in next week when we play What's My Dream? Okay. So you'll see what I mean with Daniel too, all right? Bless you. Take care.